Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Beverly Hills View. Our guest is award-winning artist Laddie John Dill, an Angelino who attended Santa Monica High School and graduated from Chouinard Art Institute. Within a few days of his graduation, he had a one-man exhibit at the Ileana Sonnabend Gallery in New York. She was quite the gallerist at that time. So, he's known as a painter, sculptor, and printmaker. Laddie's work has been included in museum exhibitions and galleries across America. He's also been shown in the Far East and all over Europe. He's taught art classes at UCLA, which I used to attend, also at UC Irvine and the Art Center, Pasadena.
And UCLA.
And UCLA.
For 15 years.
Yes, I said. We were at UCLA for a long time.
Yeah.
He's the recipient of 2 National Endowment grants, one for painting and one for sculpture. And Laddie also enjoyed the honor of being a Guggenheim Fellowship, which is quite prestigious. He's connected to Beverly Hills through a list of long collectors, whom we shall not mention, but they all live in our city, and many of you know Laddie Dill by sight. So welcome, Laddie.
Hi.
I'm glad you're here with us today. And I loved that you said UCLA for how long?
15 years.
So I used to meet you on Sunset and
Right.
go to your class, right?
Yeah, I had this film class that featured like Warhol films and, real avant-garde stuff for that time. That was in the early 70s.
Was it that early? Oh, wow.
And the art history department just hated contemporary art. But the only decent place to show it was in their little auditorium for film, so I got a Ford grant and was able to get all these films on loan and book the space.
That was so great because you used to have really good discussions, and it would always go back to art, which is what was so good about it.
Yeah.
So talking about going back to art, when did you decide to be an artist? Was it in your family?
I don't ever remember not.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Your brother Guy is an artist, but
yeah,
was there art?
Guy came in a little later. I always, I was totally encouraged by my mother, and I came from a creative background. My father, my blood father, I should say, was an actor here in, he worked for Paramount, and he wasn't a movie star or anything. He just, it was like going to Lockheed,
It was like in the creative.
Today it's early 50s, Today you're going to be an irate sheep herder, that kind of thing.
So they really, so he did,
He's
they
a
did pull him
character
in
actor.
to do things, right?
Yeah, every day. It was like,
isn't that great?
He was on salary. But then my stepfather came into my life, and he was a brilliant guy. He was a lens designer and a mathematician. And he was responsible for early stages of night vision, the green and black stuff.
Is that where, and then they use it? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember wearing it all put together with duct tape and, that kind of thing, and looking and see in the dark,
He
It was
designed.
amazing. He was one of the early guys. So he had a lot of influence on me aesthetically.
So that's what I was gonna. I was thinking about that, and I know you were one of the Malibu surfers because you lived in Malibu at the time, right? You were surfing in
Grew up in
Malibu a lot, and I was thinking of you on your board with this thing on your head, but I don't think
Night
that ever
surfing.
happened, right?
No, that never happened.
Did you ever surf at night?
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So who was surfing there with you? There were a lot of artists there.
Oh my God. That was a long time ago.
I
I was
know.
like, I was one of the founding members of the Malibu Surfing Association, and we set it up so that Surfrider Beach, which it wasn't called then, it was just called Malibu, the best surfers that we could think of could have Malibu to themselves.
Oh, you were
And-
segregating it.
Segregate. And so it became a contest, which is still going on. The first one was in 68, or 61.
So you formed
50 years ago.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And made a little pamphlet and everything, and now it's still going. It's televised even.
Oh, so that was the beginning.
Yeah, that.
But I think was Jimmy Ganser surfing
Jimmy
with
Ganser
you?
was out there. Trying to think who else. Mike Doyle was an artist.
Yeah, yeah.
He was kind of famous in those days. But then most of them, you know, you get these guys outside of the water, and they're a completely different personality. I knew, like Mickey Dora, for instance, he was like a movie star, you know.
And the surfing really added to the feeling, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It was highly romanticized.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And then came along the Gidget movie, and you know, Billy L. Bankston was down there, and all that kind of stuff. You know,
so were you guys all surfing together? Were
no,
you
not really. I didn't know Billy then.
At different times.
Also, I was a local.
Exactly. You know? That's why I was going to get to it. You went to Santa Monica High School.
Yeah, they didn't have a high school in Malibu when I went to high school.
So, did you? From there, were you taking art classes?
I'd always get D in art. It was all based on neatness.
Oh, right. Yeah, but you're a Virgo. You're pretty neat.
Well, pretty neat to a
degree.
I'm a lapsed Virgo. Yeah.
I know what that is. But when you were at Santa Monica and you were thinking about going to art school, I guess you were thinking about
yeah.
it.
Well, Santa Monica High School, I had a very sophisticated and art department.
At that point.
They were very aware. I have to really give them a lot of credit, because there was a woman, Nana Oman, who was an artist that ran the department, and she made you very aware of the fact that there may be life after your high school painting class.
Is that right? So she was like a mentor in a way.
She was like a mentor, and she's the one who made me aware of Chenard.
I was going to ask you how you got to Chenard. How would you know about it?
She just said, you know, you should go to Chenard. And at the time, I was actually taking classes at Art Center.
Oh.
And
that was in Pasadena, or was
no,
it downtown?
It was on 3rd Street.
It was on downtown at the
yeah, kind of 3rd and Midtown.
Yeah. Hancock Park.
Hancock Park.
Right.
And it didn't really work for me. And then I also took classes at UCLA.
Oh, so you were already taking art classes before you got to Chenard?
Yeah, before I graduated from high school.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh. So did she send you to those places?
No, she'd mentioned them, and I started going, and then, but she turned me on to Chenard. Chenard didn't have those kind of classes at the time. And I had a rather pending draft problem at the time. Remember, there was a Vietnam War raging. So once I took care of that, I happened to be downtown and just cruised over to Chenard, and there were all these people just sitting around in the center there, the little courtyard,
lobby,
the courtyard, yeah. And I just went, whoa, I love this place.
You just looked at them and liked them because they were talking.
I met Boyd Elder there, you know.
Oh, so cool, Boyd.
Boyd was great, and managed to get $5 off of me.
Of course.
You know.
But did you go on a scholarship?
Yeah, I had a scholarship all the way through.
And the other thing is, I know we talked to Arnaldi about this, and he said he went on a scholarship but quit, but you stayed. So when did you meet Chuck Arnaldi?
1967, I think.
And where were you in school at that time?
I was like I guess what you'd call a junior or something.
At Chenard?
You know, yeah, at Chenard. And then, I don't know, Chuck and I kind of hit it off, and then we started this frame company.
That's what he said, and but that's why I wondered how
that's
you
how I
became
made
friends.
money.
By making frames?
Making frames for the faculty.
Oh, for the
and
faculty.
and I would have, they were all made out of plexiglass, and so I would have the plexiglass cut, and then I would fabricate it. So I happened to be walking across Temple Street. This is in 1966, I think. Yeah, 66. I was walking across Temple Street, which was not what it is today, and I saw Chuck coming up over the hill, and I waved him down. The problem I had was I went into the place where they cut my plastic for me, and I was $5 short.
Oh, and you
They
knew
wouldn't
him?
give it to
Did you
me.
know him at the time?
Yeah, I kind of knew him around. He drove a primered Corvette. You know?
He was talking about his
Yeah.
car.
He always had great cars. Anyway, I waved him down, you know, and it was in the middle of summer. You could see the heat waves, you know, and here comes this primered
Oh, right.
Corvette.
Woo.
And I went, whoa, okay, that's Chuck. So I waved him down. I said, you want to be half owner of a Acme frame company, you know, or
Oh,
a
that
frame
was the,
company?
that was the partnership?
Yeah, and he said, yeah. Well, I think about it. What's the buy-in? I said, $5. And went back and got all the stuff and met him at his girlfriend's place at the time.
But then how did you get a studio downtown together?
All right, so we were all living in this house on Kingsley Avenue
Yeah.
near Wilshire.
Mid-Wilshire?
Mid-Wilshire. And there was Chuck, myself, his girlfriend, an artist you probably never heard of, Effie Rosen, who was amazing. And then Linda Schaefer also.
Oh, Linda Schaefer, who
Yeah,
does
who I
restoration.
knew from Gemini.
Right, she does
Yeah.
restoration.
Yeah, paper
Yeah.
yeah. So we all lived in this house. Well, she started dating Ron Cooper,
Wow.
and Cooper had hair down his whole back and this mustache that equally as long, but he had these eyes, you know, that were like gems. in there.
Fabulous, yeah.
And Ron seemed to know everything about downtown LA, and so he found this studio.
Oh, and for you
and
guys, or
turned
did
us
he
on
go?
to it.
Oh, I see.
He already had a studio.
But you know, finding the studio for you,
Yeah.
and 50 years later, he's the big entrepreneur in New Mexico.
No
right?
kidding.
I know.
No kidding. I invested in his
entrepreneur.
mezcal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing,
I gave him $5,000.
he gave you $5. Chuck
I gave
gave
him
you $5.
Chuck gave me $5. I gave Cooper $5,000 for his mezcal business, and to invest. You know? And he gave me a check back many years later for $119,000.
Because he's such an entrepreneur. And the great thing about
But he kept the art in it.
I know, that's what I was
You know?
going to say. The great thing about his company is he brings artists in to do the labels, right?
Yeah.
And he
Well, Kenny
Kenny Price.
Yeah.
But when we were in Taos not long ago, or in Marfa, we were in Marfa, he was giving lectures on his labels, how they made them, how they came about. Mm-hmm. So he started early on with you, which I didn't realize, and he
Cooper goes
continued.
back, to the late 60s.
So you moved into this big kind of loft area downtown with Chuck. You were partners.
Mm-hmm.
He was using sticks. What kind? And you were using plexi. What else were you using?
Plexi, and then I started. I'll give you the history of it. Because of my how do I say this? Exposure to high tech at an early age in the home, high tech in the home. We had like a laser beam running down the hall that would split into 5 directions when it hit a prism, oscilloscopes, and a lot of "don't touch that or you'll die," that kind of thing. High voltage. Right. So that was in our house, and the quality of the light, I never forgot about it. And so I started experimenting with neon, which was still readily available because neon was kind of big then in terms of advertising and signage and things like that, and don't walk signs.
Right. Were those new at that time? They must have been pretty new at that time.
They were new. And so anyway, I knew Robert Irwin, and I asked him. I said, you know, because he's always been interested in light as well. We ended up doing a lot of stuff together, but he told me about this guy Rio Score. He says, "Oh, you got to see Rio Score," and I never forgot that name. And he was a neon guy in on Riverside Drive, just opposite Griffith Park. And I started working with him, and learned a lot about glass blowing and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
he
And
did glass
yeah.
blowing?
Oh,
because
yeah.
he was doing the
Well,
neon, the glass
yeah,
tubes.
the idea, the glass tubing, yeah.
So did they blow those glass tubes and then
No,
fill
you
them
buy.
with?
They would buy lengths of it.
Yeah.
You know, and what I was interested in was just the gas and its relationship in the vacuum to the color that was inside the glass.
Well, that's what, you know, at the time, light and space was really trendy. I mean, you were kind of ahead of it. You were actually not even part of the trend. You were doing it. Now, I was going to ask you why you went into this neon, but I see that you had it all around the house. You grew up with it.
Well, not
You didn't-
neon, but the
No, but
lasers.
the idea.
Yeah.
So you didn't take electronics or science or that kind of
No,
thing.
I just learned what I needed to know.
I see. And so you weren't afraid of the material. It's
No.
fragile,
No.
right? And is
Yeah.
it deadly, the gas in it?
No.
Oh, no, it's not. Okay.
So, there's a term for it, but it's
So were you dealing with light or lack of light?
I was dealing with a source. What I wanted to do is, you know, you could write the Declaration of Independence in neon if you wanted to. I was just interested in stripping it down so that you actually saw this quality of light that almost felt like it was alive, you know, and then interacting with these coatings. So I would, almost like a painter would, you know, the juxtaposition of color, and then, but this living thing, or electronic stream of gas that was lit up under high voltage, low amperage. That's why it wouldn't hurt. You know.
But you talked about Irwin, who was
Yeah, okay,
doing
so
that.
Irwin
But
turned
did you
me
know
on to-
Larry Bell at that time too? He was using glass.
Yeah, a little later I got to know Larry. In fact, he was so generous. I was waiting for this studio to come up on Wavecrest and Speedway. I mean, rents were really cheap then.
In Venice.
Yeah, I was paying, what, $149 a month. You know?
And they were
10 cents a foot.
begging you to stay, right?
Yeah, 10 cents a foot. And so while we were waiting, Ann and I lived on Larry's work table in Larry's studio.
Oh, so you did know Larry, but
Yeah.
he was working with glass and
Yeah, glass and
glazing it.
yeah. Well, he would work with the Yeah, I understood how vacuums work and all that kind of stuff.
So you were learning that
Yeah.
as well. Well, what about your use of sand too?
Okay, here's how it goes.
Okay.
I did the light pieces, and I started to become interested on how the light was also working with the wall.
So that's where the
And so it was Peter Alexander who came in one day, and he saw these plexi, arcs that I was making and stuff like that. And he said, what is your source? And I showed him. He says, you don't have to go any further. These are great, like this,
Oh.
And it was actually Peter who, in discussion, I'm just shortening it quite a bit, but got me to start to work just directly with the tubes.
With the tubes, but then you brought sand into some of
Yeah,
these
so
situations.
then I wanted to really see how the tubes worked with a rough background. Like I started building out the wall a little bit and different kinds of things. I got to the point where I thought, well, this is going to work better on the floor, but what kind of material would I need on the floor? And then I started thinking about, well, I like the idea of sand because it's very malleable, obviously. It's like liquid. And it also has, if I use white silica sand, it had the same kind of reflective aspects as a movie screen.
Oh, so it did reflect as well.
Oh,
I didn't
yeah, it
realize the
reflected
sand
color.
was reflecting.
Yeah, it's like picking up every little pebble
I see.
would especially if it was silica sand. So I started painting with this sand and neon.
And that was in the late 60s, early
Late
70s,
60s,
right?
yeah.
So
Early
you
70s.
had, so what kind of equipment did you have in your studio then? I mean, you must have
I
had.
had a floor.
That's it?
Yeah.
You weren't using like saws or nothing? Okay.
No, really low tech. And the
Okay.
neon. I'd get these neon tubes, you know, and
And then how would you put them together to make different colors?
I would just like you would a painting.
Is that right?
Yeah. I working with the sand pieces. Yeah, I would do a painting with it. Only I used brooms and shovels.
Oh, so
And
that was your equipment.
my studio consisted of a room about this size, a little narrower, and I'd say about maybe 15 feet by 40 feet or something. And I filled it with 7,000 pounds of sand, which for all I know is still there, you know.
Where did you get it? Where did you get it?
I just went to a building supply place.
And you just bought it in
big bags. And this is the kind of stuff you do when you're in your early 20s,
Yeah.
you know, hauling up 200 pounds up the stairs, you know.
Right. But interesting that you made these things. Were there any influences from other artists or
Not at that
nature,
time.
architecture, nothing?
No, the only feedback I was getting was from Peter and Chuck.
Ah, but then you started using cement.
Yeah, well, that's later.
Oh, that's later,
Yeah,
okay.
that came later. So what I did was, when I graduated from Chenard in '68, I had to get a job, you know. So through Elsa Rady.
Oh, right. Who was a ceramist?
Yeah, right, ceramicist, yeah. She turned me on to Sid Felsen
Oh, at Gemini.
at Gemini. And I went in there and interviewed with him and got the job.
To
you
do
know,
printmaking?
as an assistant printmaker.
I see, I see.
And there I met that whole group, you know,
Everyone.
Stanley Grinstein, the Grinstein family, Ken Tyler, master printer, and of course Sid and Rosamond and
Rosamund Felsen. Do you,
Yeah.
do you continue printmaking?
occasionally, I call it print prison actually. When you,
But you
Yeah.
did make a lot of prints at
I
one
made a
point.
lot of, oh yeah, there was a period where I really did a lot of printing of my work, but I was working on like Jasper Johns's colored numbers at the time.
So were you meeting those artists at the time?
Oh
Were they
yeah, I
working
worked,
with you? Yeah.
Well, this was a real key thing where I didn't plan this, but I ended up mostly I worked for Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg and Roy Lichtenstein and Klaus Oldenburg
So the cream of our
and
New
Joseph
York.
Albers.
Joseph
yeah.
Albers too?
Mhm.
So those all had like relationships to your work in a way.
Well,
I would
they-
think so.
They
spoke to it. You spoke to
yeah.
their.
Well, at one point I had Rauschenberg over. Actually, Rosamond brought him over. He saw the work, and he asked me if I would like to do a collaboration.
Oh
you know,
yeah.
where I would do some work and he would do some work. And Sid found this place up in Baldwin Hills that was overlooked LA, you know, on a big vacant lot. And I did, what I did was I got dug holes really deep meaning 5-6 feet, and then laid neon or argon gas tubing in there. So when you looked across the lot, you know, there were these lozenges
I didn't
of
know
light.
that.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and Bob had, Mr. Rauschenberg, I should say, bought, remember the old-fashioned Klieg lights that look like Martians?
Yes, big, huge, yeah.
Yeah, like huge lights with the sticks, you know, they look like arms and legs. He put them together. They were like huge candle power, you know, and he got 2 of them and just put them up full blast and then 4 inches apart. So they looked like they were having this amazing conversation, and the light
And you
just
had your
blasted
things all
out.
around the
Yeah,
bottom.
so it was great, and it was well attended, mainly because of Sid and Gemini and all that. And
How long did it stay up?
not long. It was a one-night deal.
Oh, it was.
Yeah, And
actually, at that time, they used to do those kind of
Yeah,
things, like
happenings.
a happening,
Yeah.
right?
so
But so much work to do one
yeah,
night.
so I'm waiting for Bob to say, well, let's do another one, or something like that. Well, he actually called me and he said, listen, I know you're waiting. When's the next one? Because he had mentioned doing another one. He said, I'll do you one better. There's a Warhol show at Pasadena Art Museum, and so my dealer's going to be in town, and I'll bring them over. So that's how it happened.
That's how Ileana happened?
Yeah.
Oh,
so Bob and Rosamond brought Ileana, and I think Leo was there.
Leo Castelli.
Yeah.
She was married. Was she
Not married to him, but
she
they're
was still
close.
working with him, yeah.
And Michael Sonnabend, and I was like completely broke, and they said, "Would you like to do a show?" It was like a Cinderella story in a way.
It really is, because you're just out of school, not very long.
Well, yeah, but I'd been working
but still,
through Gemma.
yeah.
See, it was like a long, unplanned situation, but they offered me a show, and so I went back there and stayed with Al Rupersberg on Bleecker Street.
Great.
And Bleecker Street was just all these junky apartments then.
But artists were living there, right?
Yeah, yeah. Along with photographers and people like that. Anyway, famous ones.
Famous ones.
Yeah. So
Philip Glass was there.
yeah, he was still a plumber.
I know. Wasn't that great?
Anyway, so we went up to this warehouse, Al and I, where they had the pieces on 108th in Amsterdam. I remember. This is before the warehouse thing. All the shows, all the galleries were uptown, like 77th and Madison, 74th and
right.
Madison, and all that.
They were
near
very
the Whitney.
chic galleries.
Yeah,
They were
like uptown chic.
right.
Yeah. And that was where all the fine arts was. But people were starting to think in warehouse. So I think Al and I went into the first warehouse place.
Oh, you went in
which
Amsterdam?
was an empty warehouse on Amsterdam and 108th. But it had, with the requisite Corbusier chairs, in the middle of this warehouse. It was great. Except that the walls were covered with like Rauschenberg's, some masterpiece of Rauschenberg's. There was a very long Jasper Johns.
But how did that happen?
That was Castelli's warehouse.
Oh.
And so I asked the guy who was running the warehouse. See, we had to set up some pieces to see how they'd work in New York. So Al helped me do that. And I said, well, Al, I asked him where should I put my work, and he said, just kind of thread them in between the art that's on the walls.
And
right
then
now.
there's like John's.
So
and
yeah, right. Seriously, Judd.
Oh, yeah.
So Al and I are waiting for the group to come, and it was like a posse of long black cashmere jack coats. It was snowing outside and everything. And I said, well, Al, this is probably my first and last show in New York.
Oh,
But we put them up, and then we had to lower the lights, for the light pieces.
You put neons up?
In between, and lowered the lights so the paintings kind of dropped back a little bit. And they came in, and this whole herd of cashmere coats, and they said, okay, yeah, that's great. Let's schedule something.
How
like
great.
That, and that was my entree into New York.
It
was like a Cinderella story. And I'm
is.
telling you, I was 26 at the time, and I didn't know what the hell was going on,
But that was so great. It's like they took you under their wings.
Yeah, they did. And that's how, that was a very old-fashioned European way of doing things.
Right.
Like they would pick you up very young. And even the guys that who ran the gallery, were picked up when they were young. Like
And
Antonio,
nurtured, right.
who was running Sonnabend after the Sonnabends had passed away, was in the working for them when he was in his early 20s,
And
all the way through.
Stayed there.
Yeah, that's kind of more of a European way.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to take a break. Let's take
Okay.
a break. That was a great story. We'll be right back.
So they say it's a man's world? I don't see anybody's name on it. While they were doing their thing, we slowly changed ours. Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
They're coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Beverly Hills View. We're talking with artist Laddie Dill, and it's been fascinating to learn how after he graduated from Chouinard, or after he'd been working for less than a year, he went to New York, and through his work with Gemini, he met all these fantastic New York artists. I'm going to let him tell one more story.
Yeah, okay. No, I just think it's
that.
a real pivotal thing that when I went to New York the second time, I went with Janet Webb, and the two of us were going to stay at Mark DeSuvero's studio. He was the first guy to ever buy a light piece from me. Yeah. I think you were the second.
Mark DeSuvero was pretty cool. If I followed him, I'd be happy.
Yeah. Anyway, couldn't stay there. It was just too funky. Plus, it was February. It was the middle of
freezing.
Oh man. So it was January. So the only person I knew, and this is the kind of thing you do when you're in your 20s, you never do it after that. I called Jasper Johns to see if I could get a clue on where I should look, because I didn't know downtown New York very well. I called and I got his office, and I said I was just looking for a place to stay, not just a direction to go in. And she said, well, you could probably stay at Jasper's. He's out of town, but let me call. Remember, there's no cell phones.
Right.
So I stayed in this booth, and finally it rang, and she said, yeah, you could just stay at Jasper's. So I went by the office, got the key, and he had a bank, 100-year-old bank, on the corner of Essex and Houston next to Katz's Deli. And imagine a bank, an old bank, but it was completely cleared out, and hardwood floors, and this beautiful, he was working on a Dymaxion map that was about 30 feet long or something. And I stayed there for a couple of weeks, and then he showed up, and I said, well, you guys can stay a little bit longer. The guest room consisted of like the double white flag.
Oh, remember you were like all the art
said,
you
well,
had?
it looks like 17 million to me,
At that time, he was just making those things.
Right.
And, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I decided I should move, and before the show, because I didn't want to, be a guest too long. And I was at Max's Kansas City. I was talking to Jan, and Rauschenberg was at the table, and I said, we should move from Jasper's, let's find a place, that kind of thing. And he overheard me and said, you could do me a great favor. I'm moving to Florida. You can stay in my place and take care of it.
That's when Rauschenberg moved to Florida?
Yeah.
He had
Captiva.
a studio down there. But Max's Kansas City was like the great
yeah, it was
place
kind of a gathering place.
For artists. And so you kind of all talked to each other. And
yeah, it was interesting. I met Joseph Kossuth there, and
Andy Warhol. Did you
Andy
meet Andy
Warhol?
at the time?
Yes. Yeah.
And so you moved into Rauschenberg's studio?
Yeah, and people are starting, who the hell is this guy anyway? Because
So
I would say, well, I'm staying at, Lafayette and Great Jones. And they went, God, you're right next to Bob Rauschenberg.
I know.
Well, I'm actually in the house,
But people knew, everyone knew where everyone lived, and it was kind of like an inside group. You started, so we finished
But through that,
Yeah.
I was able to have conversations with John Cage and Merce Cunningham and Buckminster Fuller.
So it was a mix of the cultures.
Yeah. And these guys were on top of it. And I mean, I'm sitting next to John Cage, and I'm saying, God, I'm sitting next to John Cage, and I can't think of a damn thing to say. You know? So he was a chain smoker, and so I just bummed a cigarette off, and we started a conversation. You know, you could do that in those days.
Yeah, and the same thing like with Buckminster Fuller, where you have this relationship, Frank Gehry. Once you were back in Venice, where Frank Gehry was like the same kind of action and interaction with the artist.
Oh yeah, Frank really considered himself one of the artists.
Yeah.
And a lot of his ideas in some of the stuff like the plywood as a finished surface and all that.
Right.
I remember Bankston doing that.
And Billy Al did that too.
Yeah, Billy Al.
You use the plywood. Actually, that's a really good way to get into the plywood because you use that as the basis for your for your cement and
glass.
Talk about
pieces.
that a little bit because then you went into wall pieces.
I did a series of museum shows with the neon and the glass. This is like in '73 or something like that. And I was in Germany, and the thing about most of the work that I did, with the exception of the neon pieces on the wall, they were very ephemeral. They lasted
That's the thing.
a month.
That's the thing. That's what I was going to ask you. How does a collector have a
You
pile
don't.
of sand? You don't.
You own the rights to it. But there are collectors now that own
museums.
some of my sand pieces. And museums. Like Museum of Modern Art owns that particular glass and cement
So
piece.
do they
glass
save?
and sand
Do
piece.
they save the sand?
No.
No, they don't.
No.
But they have the drawings to it.
Yeah, they have drawings. I'm sure working with me, they could figure it out. It's basically about a mass of sand, which seems arbitrary, which is fine-tuning a very complex mathematical progression.
But let's get to the wall. We don't have much time left,
Okay.
so let's get to the plywood.
Okay, so I was in Germany. I did a sand piece in Berlin, and then I started thinking, I really want to make something more archivally.
Right.
So I went to the man who knew everything, Jack Brogan.
Oh,
and
right.
we worked out a formula for cement that I could get the material, and it would go rock hard and last and be able to breathe at the same time. All these kind of physical things.
We have a picture of that. So continue talking and we'll bring it up
All
like
right,
that.
yeah, okay,
And you
that
use
one-
color.
Yeah, what I did was I primed marine ply surface, and I primed it with a cement emulsion. That's this polymer emulsion instead of water, but it kept the cement properties, except that it would adhere to
The
glass, or
to
wood,
everything.
things that you'd normally use as a mold,
I
and
see.
Because of this polymer, and I would mix raw pigment into the cement.
I see.
And in this case, a lot of red iron oxide, and then I would have it in buckets, and then I would lay down a level of silicone, just like caulking compound, clear, and then I would do a painting into the silicone, and I'd have the glass already tempered and cut. I cut it, and then I had it tempered, and then spread it out over and then apply weight to it, my weight, until I could move it around and then let it set.
It's really interesting because you use the tempered glass, which is what Larry Bell was using in a way, learning how to, and it sounds so scientific. Everything that came from your early years,
That scientific
seemed to
method,
come,
yeah.
Yeah, seems to come out.
That's why I got along with Brogan pretty well. When something
and Jack
didn't
Brogan
work.
is here. He wasn't in Berlin. You were in Berlin.
Oh yeah,
figuring
Brogan was
this
on
out.
Lincoln Boulevard.
Yeah, Jack Brogan is here in LA, and we think he is like the problem solver for many artists.
Name an artist, I could probably tell you what his relationship was.
We have to leave, but I want to just talk about the one time you were at the Venice Biennale, and then the work you were doing in Naples, because instead of the sand pieces that you were using sand, you were using
volcanic rock.
And from the
I got
Vesuvius.
into, I was traveling so much that I got into doing these pieces where I would use materials indigenous to the area.
Oh, did that happen in Venice too?
Venice, No.
Okay, just talk about Venice. Just
Venice,
for one thing.
actually in Veneto, the area
Yeah,
of Veneto,
right.
the material came from it.
I see.
You know, so
and you used the
in
neon,
a sense, it was indigenous.
and it was an installation for one of the biennales.
Yeah, 2011.
So it was. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's get to Naples because I think that's
Okay.
fascinating that you could use that kind of material.
Yeah. Okay. So Naples was easy because there's Vesuvius right there.
I know.
And so I used like volcanic rock to build it up, and then finer grades of it, and then salt, because salt was big in
Salt.
yeah, and so the salt was white, but it was translucent, so the light would come up through the salt.
But one thing, you use volcanic rock. You use the volcanic rock. That's such a hard surface with such a fragile tube.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Carefully.
Carefully.
Yeah.
Do they break during the thing?
No, the first few attempts at doing it in the studio and stuff, I would break them,
You
step
learn-
on
yeah.
them and all that. But now, I've got a method. But
And that piece is at the archaeological. Was
Yeah.
it the archaeological?
yeah, the archaeological museum in Napoli, all the stuff from Pompeii is in there.
I know, it's so great.
So I look at it as a group show, and I'm the youngest for a change by 2,500 years.
I know, that is so great. And I think with that, we're going to leave because what could be better than having your work at the Archaeological Museum in Naples?
Yeah, the best one for
We're not gonna leave.
indigenous material was Paris, though.
Oh, you did?
Because
Oh, okay.
yeah, I did one for the Gulbenkian Foundation.
Oh, the Armenians.
Yeah,
Oh,
in Paris,
right,
they have
right,
an
right.
amazing museum there.
I forgot that.
If
yeah.
you know where it is, I mean, they don't
It's
have
up
a
by
big
the Arc
thing.
de Triomphe, right?
Yeah, it's in the 7th.
It's in the 7th.
Yeah,
okay.
so it's on the west side, or the
It's on the
left
other side.
side.
It's on the wrong side. Right.
it's on the left side.
Right.
So it was like a challenge. They wanted to do a light piece, and I said, well, I want to use materials indigenous to Paris. And they said, well, good luck with that, And so it was easy with the internet. I just looked up, found out that Paris sits on a thing called the Paris Plain, where the river runs through it, and it's a shelf of Letitia limestone.
Oh, wow.
And all of the buildings, including the Letitia Hotel,
Oh,
are made
right.
out of Letitia limestone.
Oh, wow.
The Louvre, Notre
Letitia,
Dame
yeah.
will be made out of it again. And so I found that a quarry that could grind it, they still use it,
That's so great.
And so it was delivered to the museum.
So you had it ground? You
Yeah, I had it
that
ground into a
limestone?
fine powder.
And it's funny because in Armenia, they have tufa stone.
Yeah.
And all the buildings are made out of that. It's red.
Yeah.
But yours was white. The white limestone, the limestone was
It
white.
was kind of the color of this table.
Oh, kind of beigey.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. I
had one more.
No, I
No,
didn't
forget
want,
about it.
I didn't want to cut you off because I thought that was such a great story. Laddie, we could go on. I know this has been a long show, Beverly Hills people, but I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Laddie Dill,
All
for
right.
being with us, and thank you for watching. I'm Joan Quinn. We'll see you next time.